The policeman walked along the street, looking confident and serious. He always walked this way, though he wasn't trying to show off. There weren't many people around to notice him anyway. It was only 10 o'clock at night, but the weather was cold, and the wind carried a light drizzle. As he walked, he stopped at doors, checking to make sure they were locked for the night. Occasionally, he glanced up and down the street. He looked like a good cop, alert and ready to keep the area safe. In this part of the city, people usually went home early. Sometimes you might see lights from a shop or a small restaurant, but most places were already closed for the night. Then the cop slowed down. Near the door of a closed shop, a man was standing in the shadows. The cop walked closer, and the man quickly spoke. "It's okay, officer," the man said. "I'm just waiting for a friend. We made a promise 20 years ago to meet here tonight." It probably sounds strange, but I can explain if you need me to. He pointed to the shop behind him. There used to be a restaurant here called Big Joe Brady's. It closed down 5 years ago. The cop nodded. "Yes, I remember the place," he said. The man had a square face, bright eyes, and a small scar near his right eye. He wore a fancy tie with a big diamond in it. 20 years ago tonight, the man continued, I had dinner here with my best friend, Jimmy Wells. He was the best guy I ever knew. We grew up together in New York, like brothers. I was 18 and he was 20. The next day, I was leaving for the West to start a new life and make my fortune. But Jimmy, you couldn't get him to leave New York. He loved it too much. We agreed that night that we'd meet here again in 20 years. We wanted to see how life had turned out for both of us. The cop raised an eyebrow. That's quite a story. 20 years is a long time. Have you heard from your friend since you left? The man shook his head. We wrote letters for a couple of years, but then we lost touch. The West is a big place, and I moved around a lot. But I know Jimmy. He's loyal. If he's still alive, he'll be here. I came over 1,000 miles just to keep this promise. He pulled out an expensive-looking pocket watch with little jewels on it. It's almost 10, he said. That's when we said goodbye here 20 years ago. You've done well for yourself, haven't you? The cop asked. I have, the man said. I hope Jimmy has done just as well. He was slower than me. I had to fight hard for what I achieved. In New York, people don't change much, but in the West, you learn to fight for success. The cop took a step back. Well, I'll let you wait. I hope your friend shows up. If he's not here by 10, will you leave? No, the man said firmly. I'll wait at least 30 minutes. If Jimmy's alive, he'll be here. Good night, officer. Good night, the cop said, walking away, checking doors as he went. The rain started coming down harder, and the wind grew colder. A few people passed by quickly, trying to stay warm. The man kept waiting by the shop door. He waited for about 20 minutes before a tall man in a long coat crossed the street and walked toward him. "Is that you, Bob?" the tall man asked, sounding unsure. "Jimmy Wells? Is that really you?" Bob said, excited. The tall man grabbed Bob's hands. "It's me, Bob. I knew I'd find you here if you were still alive. 20 years is a long time. Too bad the old restaurant is gone. I wish we could sit down for dinner there again. How's life in the West?" "It's been good to me," Bob said. "You've changed, Jimmy. I don't remember you being so tall." "I grew a bit after you left," Jimmy said with a smile. "Are you doing well in New York?" Bob asked. "Not too bad. I work for the city," Jimmy said. "Come on, let's go somewhere warm and talk about old times." The two men walked arm in arm down the street. Bob began telling stories about his life, while Jimmy listened closely. His coat collar pulled up against the wind. When they passed a brightly lit shop, Bob suddenly stopped and pulled away. He stared at the other man's face. "You're not Jimmy Wells," Bob said sharply. 20 years can change a lot, but not a man's nose." The tall man nodded calmly. "No, I'm not Jimmy, but 20 years can turn a good man into a bad one." "You've been under arrest for 10 minutes, Bob. Chicago police told us you might come to New York, so we've been watching for you." The man pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to Bob. "Here's a note from a cop named Jimmy Wells. He asked me to give it to you." Bob's hands shook as he opened the paper and read the short message. "Bob, I was at the meeting place on time, but when I saw your face, I recognized you as someone wanted by the Chicago police. I didn't want to arrest you myself, so I got another officer to do it. Jimmy."